the continued support that this committee receives from the school board and also from the CTE department. Beth and her team have been great providing us with the support that we need to keep the meetings going, keep them flowing, and then also connecting us with the right FCPS, resources to get the committee's work done. So the first slide that I'll present was the committee's charge for this past school year, which was approved by the board, which was to investigate current practices and develop recommendations for improvement in the communication of CTE programs to families and students in collaboration with local industry. So with that charge, we have the slate of the committee members that were active on the committee this year. We had several new members from Northern Virginia Community College, also a new member this year, which was great to have from the council, the County Council of PTA. And as you see, there are the school board representatives and the selection members from both business and industry. It was great to have, as I mentioned in the report, a very diverse group of folks on the committee this year. You met the sort of charge or request that I had to kind of really get some folks from business and industry who could add value to the committee and be engaged. Attendance was great this year, so it was a pleasure working with the fellow members, and two of them are actually here present with us this evening, John and Jim, who are in the room as longtime members of the committee as well. So thank them for their support and participation throughout the year and their support today for this presentation. So committee activities, again, in the report, you'll see sort of a summary of the calendar activities, but throughout the course of the year, we kicked off with the endorsement of new courses that are being offered in the CTE program. Of course, the typical endorsement of the 2019-20 Perkins budget request, and also an update from the school board by Karen and Dr. Presidio. An ISD update was provided to the committee early on in the year as well, which sort of set the pace for the work that we did moving forward in the calendar year. So to meet the board's charge, we undertook 3 different distinct activities. Parent focus groups, and actually partnered with the FCCPTA to do a survey to the parents and community, and we also had an industry focus group. And I can certainly, again, as I mentioned at the end of this meeting, provide more details or answer questions that you may have, but I've summarized it here. We were able to work with or through the Fairfax County PTA to schedule parent focus groups at Justice, Herndon, and Annandale High School. And the summary results of that survey are in your, the results of that are inside of the final report. And basically, I summarize it in one sentence by saying that the overall theme that we got from all 3 of those was that parents and guardians had a desire for more information related to CTE programs. There definitely was interest, and the key thing, the theme, as I mentioned, that we got out of that was the desire to get more information and making it streamlined, finding a way to streamline the process so the information gets to them. The second piece was the Fairfax County PTA survey. This is something I believe our vice chair, Mary Porter, who's not here with us this evening, sort of spearheaded with the group. I believe they do this survey every year, but they were willing to work with us to add just a couple questions related to the CTE program. The survey was responded to by over 6,000 respondents, and it basically questioned them on their familiarity with the CTE program, whether or not they had one or more children who were enrolled in a CTE course, and how did they learn about electives that are CTE related. And the top 2 choices for that last question are there, and that was word of mouth and course catalog. With regards to whether or not they had children in a CTE course, you can also sort of go back to the parent focus groups that I participated in. The majority of them actually did not know whether or not their student was in a CTE course. They knew the course name, but they didn't necessarily correlate that with it being a CTE course. So as I go through the presentation deck, you'll see, based on our recommendations, that we sort of highlight some things that we feel like the school board and division can do to sort of address that challenge for parents. And then familiarity with the CTE program, it was, I wouldn't call it hit and miss, but most of them were familiar with the traditional programs. So the culinary arts, the automotive, the traditional CTE type programs. When we did talk about coding, some of the networking, things that you often see at the academies, they related to those being academy programs, but not necessarily CTE. So again, we've seen this common theme happen a lot with sort of correlating the CTE pathways with the classes that are being offered and what's happening at the academy. And I think our recommendations at the end, based on the committee's work, summarize what we feel like would be able to address this. And last but not least was an industry focus group that was held in February. We actually got the members of the committee, since we had a very diverse audience, together for that meeting, where we used an industry recognized approach to developing a communication strategy to come up with ideas based on industry input as to what the school division could do to better communicate CTE to parents, students, and families. And the two overarching themes that came out of all of those particular breakout groups was aligning the career pathways with the FCPS theme of pathways to success. So ensure that all of the work that's being done with Pathway to Success and the Pathways to Graduation is somehow encapsulates the career pathways as well. And then also an increased emphasis on try before you buy approach to career options, letting students know that this is an opportunity for them to take courses that they may have an interest in based on their interest or their career interests, so that before they move forward and take a second course or decide to major in college in a particular pathway, this is a way for them to get exposure to know if it's something that they're really interested in. So based on the work that we did throughout the year in these three distinct areas, the committee has come up with two overarching recommendations for the final report. The first one being a new approach to communicating CTE. And I think you probably have heard this before. I know I've been on the committee, I think this is my 5th year. And when I came on the committee, there was this effort to re-communicate, find a better way to communicate CTE. So there's a lot been done with the website. But the committee felt that with the introduction and the student interest in social media and things of that nature, that there's definitely more room for growth in the areas of finding new approaches to communicating. So the first recommendation, I'll read the highlight of the top, which is basically to create a strategy for communicating career pathways by, the key thing here was to collaborate with the FCPS Office of Communications and Community Relations to expand the scope and leverage existing communication channels to increase outreach to parents, students, and other stakeholders. And under that, we had 3 additional sort of sub-bullet points that emphasize the points that would support implementation of this recommendation, including providing training and support to CTE teachers and school counselors to ensure there's a consistent messaging that's delivered. That's something else that we took note of as well. To ensure there's consistent messaging, so no matter where the student is getting the information or how it's being communicated from the parents, the message is consistent, that CTE courses and programs offer pathways to high demand careers. The second recommendation being connecting courses to careers. So the committee was certainly in agreement with creating a career exploration summer program. We just threw in the title, for example, for Fairfax Career Institute for current and rising middle and high school students in collaboration with industry, continuing the efforts that the committee did this year to really engage industry around what needs to be done to engage students in these careers, that integrates both work-based learning opportunities and provides exposure to CTE courses. We think one of the bigger sort of takeaways or one of the bigger wins out of this particular recommendation would be the opportunity to leverage this program to collaborate with industry to develop curriculum and support teacher professional development. So this is a way that teachers can work with industry professionals to figure out what needs to be sort of taught during the summer, and then this curriculum could also be taken back to the classroom during the school year, and it's a way for them to get things that are real-world experiences, real-world examples of what's happening across these different career pathways and clusters. That is the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Great presentation, and we really appreciate all your hard work this year, really providing a fresh approach to looking at how to do this. So thank you. I have Elizabeth Schultz, followed by Megan McLaughlin.
So again, this too is one of my favorite committee reports because of the rest, the rest of us. What one of my constituents calls the regular kids, and that this is a pathway that is meaningful. So a couple of, one's a feedback and one's a question. Working with the FCC PTA, while I laud that as a pathway, a lot of my schools are no longer PTAs or were never PTAs. And so I worry that we're missing out on swaths of schools and therefore like critical potential feedback loop from certain communities that perpetually only get surveyed because they're a PTA school. So I worry about that. I worry that those 3 high schools, Annandale, it was Annandale Justice and Herndon, those are very disparately located from some of our magisterial districts, and therefore there's zero representation to some extent. And there are kids that benefit from CTE in all magisterial districts. With regard to the second recommendation, number 2, on that Summer Career Institute, I love that. I think that is, I mean, the sooner we can get to that, I think the better. I think a lot of parents eschew CTE courses because they still are in the mindset that this is vo-tech. They don't understand how that works with even a college preparatory, bound student. That they don't see it. So even if the student is representing interest, they're not necessarily getting support at home, or that's not being reinforced, or the parents may want it and the kids don't even know, like, that they don't even know what it means. So that try before you buy type mentality, I love. I think we should pilot it. I think you should start that interest actually, because you said in middle school, I think you ought to start pumping it into 6th grade so that those kids know that this is something, like, they start talking about this even earlier in the educational career, because a lot of times I find that parents, by the time they figure any of this out, even if they are interested, it's sort of in the rearview mirror and it's sort of too late. So starting earlier in the educational career and acknowledging that different children within a multi-child family, like your first child may have gone, I don't know, to William and Mary or whatever, and the next child maybe not so much, and they need another path. But I think we also have to be realistic in the discussion with our students and acknowledging that a lot of students who go to college aren't finishing college, and possessing some real-world skills and getting some technical certifications may be an awesome thing to either springboard into a career, maybe something to fall back on. There's a lot of different reasons to access that. So I think the way that we talk about it, being honest about where we are situationally with students going off to school and not necessarily graduating, these are valuable life skills. So I'm hoping, that this is the beginning of something beautiful.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz. I have Ms. McLaughlin.
Thank you. Before I begin my remarks, I do want to just acknowledge that we have other members of the CTEC with us here this evening. So if you could please stand up, members of the CTEC, so we get a chance to appreciate your presence here.
I did. Yeah.
He was hiding behind your
Yeah, I
chair
did
when
not see
Charles
him,
couldn't
yeah.
see him.
No worries at all. I just thought it was great that they were here. So I want to first begin by saying how much I appreciate all the time that all of our volunteers give to these advisory committees. It's extremely valuable. And I know that it also requires time of staff. And I don't know how the assistant superintendents handle that component, but dedication to this work is always appreciated. That said, I was looking at the report and I was kind of hoping that we might be able to have, maybe it just comes through a staff summary, but the annual report doesn't really touch on some important areas, in particular on page 3, where it's talking about, during the course of this year's service, the meetings comprised of the following. And number 3 item says endorsements of new courses, but as a board member, I'm not sure what those new courses are. And so I think that would be beneficial for the board to know what those are. this number 4 said endorsements and explanation of the Perkins budget request, which is required by federal act. I would like to know what that is, because it sounds important, but it's not captured that I saw. So I think it would be good for the board to know what that is.
Just to be clear,
Yes.
you're requesting that these items be added to future annual reports?
No,
from the
I'm going to
committee?
ask for the board to direct the superintendent to have staff who were the liaison to this committee just provide information on this. I mean, it clearly got covered
Yes.
in your work this year.
Yes.
You're all volunteers. So during staff's paid hours.
I just want to make sure
Yeah.
for next year, if, because I've been elected for the chair next year as well, that
Yeah.
I include this in the annual report next year is what I was asking.
Thank you. I think that for the 9 items that were there, I would just say if it's spotlighted in here, which I'm so impressed with the work you've all done, I would like that then expanded upon in the report, just so we can benefit.
Of course.
Since in the end, this is about advising the board.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And then number 5, it said that the VDOE annual report was presented. Again, I'd like to know what the report was, because we don't unfortunately tend to get a lot of briefings on what the Virginia Department of Education is necessarily telling school divisions. And then number 6, under the tailored questions on the FCC PTA survey and focus group, I would say just create that as an appendix so we can just see what questions were asked and appreciate how we were soliciting that information. And then the number 7, the industry focus group. Shoot, I already ran out of my time. All right, I'm just going to quickly close with this, and then I'll just do a go back. For the industry focus group, well, actually, I don't want to shortchange this. I will come back and cover 7 and 8 that I had questions on.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Ms.
And
Strauss?
just for the record, for number 6, the parent PTA, it's actually appendix on page 7. The questions were added on page 7 of the report. Appendix A.
You're correct. I didn't realize it's just going to be those 3 questions. So I did highlight those, so thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for
You're
pointing
welcome.
that out,
No
and then I'll
problem.
do my go back on the other questions.
Sure.
Ms. Strauss?
First of all, thank you all very much for doing this important work and continuing our outreach to parents and students so that they know what fine courses these are. And I think the steps that you've taken are commendable and gives us important information. And Ms. McLaughlin was actually asking some of the same questions I was, and I've just pulled up the CTE basic headings for course selection. But I would like to know what were the new courses so that we're updated. And I think that would maybe be a good, just yearly, and I guess if we could get from staff, just your latest course offerings, because we kind of lose contact. This is our one time a year when we get to talk to you all. I think that's the most important thing that I would like, is to see the course offerings this year. But also, if we, and you probably know, are the enrollment numbers for either the courses or the career pathways. You would like this? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that gives us an opportunity to see if we're expanding and basically student numbers, how that compares to last year. So,
Okay.
in your leisure time. But thank you again very much for your service. We really do appreciate it. This is a very important part of what we make available for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strauss. Ms. Keys-Gamarra?
First, I do thank you. I, as a mother of at least 2 of my boys, went through the CTE and they got a car so they could get to the program. They didn't have it in the, I think that was part of the bargaining chip. But in any case, they enjoyed it very much. And, but I would like more information. I agree with my colleagues about, enrollment and where students are coming from. I know my kids were at Madison and they had to drive to Marshall. And so who's able to benefit from these programs and that sort of thing is where I would be interested. I know, you know, all have our desires to be able, we can't do as much as we would like, but I certainly would like to make sure that we aren't having an equity concern with respect to what's available to whom.
Thank you, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Ms. Hines?
Thank you very much. This is very helpful. Thanks a lot. My only question, and I'm sorry if I missed it in the report or in your remarks, do the community have a feeling about its charge for next year? The committee, have we, because that's one of the things that we've talked about as a board, is being able to talk about the charge for next year at this meeting, you know, where we hear the report from this year. And I mean, if the committee hasn't had a chance to think about that yet, I wonder, I'm looking at page 3 of the report and where the recommendations are. And I'm just wondering, looking at those recommendations, if there's anything in there that maybe the committee could go back and work on?
There actually is a charge that the committee voted on that we just submitted today to the school board office. I do not have it in front of me, but we did just submit it. They were due by July 5th, and so we actually sent that email off today. So I just, off the top of my head, I wouldn't want to say it verbatim because I don't have it in front of me.
Gotcha, yeah.
If I could, I just want to acknowledge Ms. Hines' question, and it's really, really important because when the committees do their work, it's focused on the board charge that the board approves, and when they prepare the reports, they're only preparing a report based on the charge that they had.
Right.
So to the extent that there's board consensus about things that you have areas of interest in and that you would like us to have these committees focus on, it's really good to do that up front and have that be part of the charge. Otherwise, the committee won't actually contemplate or discuss or look at those types of issues. So anything that we can do around that, and typically that work is done in terms of finalizing the charges with the school board appointee to that particular committee.
Yes, thank you. And so, Madam Clerk, is there any way that, do you think you could just forward that on to the board members? Is that appropriate, do you think? Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, because as I look, thank you.
It came from Brenda
While you do
Jaggi. That helps. It came from Brenda Jaggi.
As I look at the recommendations, it sounds like maybe a theme in there is collaborating with industry, because that comes up a couple of times, right? And do we think that they're, so I don't know, and we'll have to take a look at the chart,
And the charge, as Beth mentioned, I don't remember it verbatim, but it did have something to do with working with industry, specifically focused on work-based learning experiences.
Right, thank you. So do you feel like the charge that you guys came up with is going to help continue the work and the
Exactly.
recommendations?
That was the whole
Okay.
purpose of developing that, was to continue the work that we've already started. And I think, and again, as the committee mentioned, I'll stress, the sooner we can get your endorsement of that,
Right.
the sooner we can start planning out how we'll undertake those activities.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Moon, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the presentation. And if this has been already explained to us, please forgive me for asking the same questions. The two recommendations seems to indicate two positions. The first one, let me start with the second one, which is for CT summer programs. So if a staff position is to basically support the I'll take that back. So is the full-time position that is being requested for?
Actually, that for both of these positions, we received an additional allotment from our Perkins grant this year. And so we put in that grant to cover the cost of these positions. And so they we're in the process right now of interviewing for those, and we'll have a person.
The board does not have to allocate additional
Correct.
funding to fill these positions.
We can have these positions for up to 3 years. And so the purpose of the summer programs position is to look at making sure that our programs, that students have equitable access to our programs, and that we have a cross-section of students enrolled in those programs, and that we are looking at particularly non-traditional students, females in traditionally male occupations and males in traditionally female occupations. That is one area on our annual report that we struggle with, as does every division in our region. So we are looking at ways collaboratively with other divisions to try to help that, and that position is looking at revamping our current STEM camp, Tech Adventure Camp, and offering opportunities from 3rd grade to 11th grade for students, summer, after school, and on breaks, teacher work days, those types of things. So that's what they'll be tasked with for the next 3 years. And then the other position that was requested at the top of the communication is a person who will be really looking at the career pathways that we have been talking about and how to best communicate that to parents, and making sure that we have clear and discernible and understandable pathways for students, staff, and parents. So that will be, that position will be looking at that, working in conjunction with our colleagues in curriculum and instruction, as well as our school counseling staff, to make sure that we have pathways that are inclusive of all elective programs, not just CTE programs, and kids understand if they want to go into a government pathway, here are the elective programs across all areas that are offered that would support their choice.
Okay. So using the Perkins grant funding, are we seeking 2 full-time positions?
Correct.
Okay. And the next question is, maybe this is more of a philosophical question. I guess the reason to wanting to improve the communication of our CTE programs to families and students is to not only to raise the awareness, but also possibly increase a number of students in participating in taking CTE courses.
I think it's to increase the awareness of what the pathways of the courses. Currently, we have over 65,000 students in grades 7 through 12 who take our CTE programs annually. Sometimes they just don't know they're taking a CTE program. We have approximately between 4,800 and 5,000 students that we survey 9 months after graduation that have taken 2 or more of our classes, and consistently when we have our callers call to find out what they're doing to report that data back, they tell us that they didn't take a CTE course. And then when we say, well, you took marketing or you took business and information technology, they're like, oh, that's a CTE course. So it's a branding problem, and I think what we're hoping to do is discover, do we want them to know they took a CTE course, or do we want them to know that they took a course in a pathway that leads to an employable field?
I get that. So by being able to identify the courses they have taken on CTE courses, how does that help the students or school system?
I'm not sure that being able to identify the courses that are CTE, I think being able to connect the coursework that they're taking to a career pathway that leads to a future career opportunity, whether it's work right after school, post-secondary training, 2 or 4-year education, that's what we want them to identify with. What elective area it's in, whether it's in fine arts or social studies or CTE, doesn't really matter. It matters that they can connect those dots and know that this is my interest, this is my abilities, and this is where I want to go, and this is how I'm going to get there.
Okay, thank you. That's what I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. I have Ms. Derenak Kovacs.
Yes, I want to thank you for being here tonight and sharing this excellent report with us. Just as so many of my colleagues talked about, I appreciate both of your recommendations, but are very excited about the summer exploration program to try and get that. We were sidebarring over here and saying, that's excellent. And I'm like, I know, it's like, why didn't we think of it before? I mean, it's kind of simple, but thank you for bringing it forward. I think it's very important that students understand and know what opportunities are out there for them, because lots of, as we all acknowledge, lots of kids take different pathways, and we offer these excellent opportunities. And I did see that there was a high, and you've acknowledged that from the county council, that, 67% of the people, they said they weren't familiar with it at all from that. So that's, so we definitely have to, for many, many reasons, we need to help them to identify it, not just because, like you said, so we can identify it as such, but so they understand that that's available for them, and they understand that that is part of our pathway, and I think it'll help us market, if you will, these classes. Ms. Keys-Gamarra said something, and then Dr. Presidio kind of, talked about that. And thank you, Ms. Hines, for asking the clerk to see if we can see the charge for next year. Because I think, so this is my 8th year on the board, and we've always have sung the praises of this type of education for our students. But so many of the years that we've been on the board, we've been in a cut mode, and we do know there is not, unfortunately, equity is lacking in some areas. The opportunities for all kids to get all these, it's just not physically possible. We can't get buses. And so I would like to look at that. I like to see what the charge is in comparison, or if that can be incorporated into whatever charge the committee found to be needed next year. But for so many years, we just said, well, we couldn't afford to invest, and maybe now's the time when we can look at investing to see, because, again, not all programs are attainable for everyone because our county is so large.
Yes, Dr. Brabrand.
If I may, I heard, I know we don't have it yet, and you talked about collaboration with industry. Oh, you do have it? But I wonder whether we could overlay whatever's in there, something around access and opportunity gaps, which is already in our strategic plan, and have the charge around, can CTE, this task force, help us fill in what those gaps are? Because I think part of the marketing message is where it works well and the kids have and know about it, the word of mouth pulls kids in. There's just some places we have islands of desert, CTE deserts. And we've got to figure out how we fill those gaps, just like a food desert in a community. And this is nutritious programming for kids. Some don't even know they're taking it when they are. Some don't even know it exists. And how do we pull them in? So that equity and access overlay, maybe perhaps to the charge, could help us see where it's missing, and it can help us inform our budget for the coming year.
Ms. Derenak-Kovacs, are you finished? Okay, thank you. So I have Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Brabrand, your analogy to healthy eating, I hope we're going to not have to convince the kids to eat their broccoli. I think I think actually it's the opposite, that these are, these CTE courses, in fact, for a pretty large percentage of our student body are really critical to their success in the future. And that bringing this awareness and helping them to see sort of where these CTE courses can take them is really a critical function that I think Beth, of course, is totally aware of. Let me just say that I did want to reiterate Ms. McLaughlin's comments about providing some of the information that's referenced in some of the bullets. I think that's
Happy to do that.
Yeah, that's something I think we'd all like to see each year. One question I had is how much, well, first the question I have, and this may be Dr. Brabrand or Beth, I'm not sure either of you really are directly kind of on this question, but do the seniors who are not intending to enroll in college have a next step meeting at the school prior to graduation so that they can sort of huddle with the counselor about what's next for them?
And Jen is here. I know we have our academic and career, Jen Glazer is here, our academic and career plan. I don't know if it is accurate to say every kid has an academic and career plan, including those that are not going to college. I don't know if it's accurate to say at the end of senior year, are we checking in on that? I don't know, Jen, do you want to offer some context for that?
We do have our work with school counselors developing to ensure that students all have individualized meetings with their school counselors throughout senior year so that school counselors are aware of the student's next step and what action they have taken to achieve that next step. And it is incorporated into the academic and career plan, not just for senior year. But we know that we have more opportunities to continue to expand what we're doing to really personalize that work with each individual student. So I think it's a great question. We do a variety of programs at schools. When we know that a student hasn't applied to a college, for example, then we're bringing those students in by invitation to the Career Center to talk about options such as NOVA, apprenticeship, other workforce opportunities, so that they know that we are here to support them in that next step towards post-secondary education or work.
So, Mr. Wilson, I just want to add one other thing that I've been talking with staff about. For years, our Career Center's been great at colleges come in. UVA's here this week, Virginia Tech's next week, and kids can get passes and come down. We've got to create how to add the career, this collaboration with industry, that it's Amazon's here in October. There's 10 internships available either for the summer or for the year. Next comes Volkswagen, and have the companies coming in, much like the colleges come in, to sort of sell either their apprenticeships or internships and opportunities. And we can pull kids that we know are already in those courses to come down and get connected. We've been set up more to supporting that four-year college kid, and we've got to spend more time, I think, aligning a structure that we already have to start to invite the kid and the company to come together for internships and apprenticeships. And I know we're taking a bigger focus. The summer idea you see here is starting that mindset, but we've got to include it in the normal course of the year, just like we do the colleges. And part of it, I think, is still the branding. Something Ms. Schultz said, I think, is right. We sort of pivoted away to say that VOTEC or CTE was not a Fairfax thing. And the truth is, it absolutely has to be, and it's an essential part of it. And we've got to rebrand better. We got to tell our story and communicate better. But we have infrastructures in place to add back in the career at the same level that we've been doing college support.
Yeah, I think that, thank you, Dr. Burden, that's very helpful, and I appreciate your sentiments on that, because I think that actually this is probably a gap in the fairness and treatment of students in terms of what sort of help and coaching are they getting from counselors and the career office when they're in their senior year of high school and getting ready to move to the next stage. So I'm really grateful that you got your eye on that ball, and we're going to follow up on that. Another question, Beth, and this I think you probably do know the answer to. So in terms of the CTE certifications, how much overlap is there with the certification programs that are in the ACE program?
Well, actually, we've been partnering a lot lately, and I've been having a lot of conversations with Karen Williams to make sure that we have a continuum so that our students who might not have strong post-secondary plans or might need additional training can access our ACE courses and access our IT courses and access some of the other programs. We work closely with them on apprenticeship, on healthcare, on IT. Those are the three big ones that we work with on. We utilize lab space and share lab space when necessary. So we are very much tuned into that. We have some work to do with the IT piece to make sure that we get all of our satellite centers up to be IT testing centers, but we've talked about having them come to our academies to test.
So if a student wants to take an ACE course while they're in high school, do they have to pay for it if it's a CTE, if it's part of their CTE?
Yes, they do.
Okay, and of course they would pay after graduation then.
Correct.
And I think, Dr. Brabrand, this is something, and I think that it's worth considering allocating some funds to allow students to continue in their CTE pursuits through the ACE program, both during school and in the year or two after school, so that we can help those kids get the certifications that they want and need to integrate and be productive in our community.
Mr. McElveen?
So just to expand on what others have said, I think the summer program is a great idea, and I think I would have two questions on that front. Number one is, would we view it in the model of the currently the programs we're currently running, like the summer arts program, the STEM program? Would we kind of latch it onto that? And secondly, have we done any sort of costing out of what that might look like?
We haven't finished the costing out of it. We've done some initial costing, but nothing that has been where I would be ready to share that at this point. But we are looking at actually a multi-level approach. For our younger students, up through the 8th grade, parents like the week-long programs because that also serves as a safe place while they work for their students. Once you start getting into high school, a high school student doing a week-long camp experience is not going to work. However, we're looking at trying to develop multi-day opportunities with business partners or multi-day opportunities in our academy sites where we have our specialized programs so that they can come in and do real-world experiences. For instance, in our healthcare program, we've talked a lot about having students come in and run simulations that our students do during the school year, and looking at using our mannequins and our electronic devices there to help with that that experience. But we really are hoping that we will be able to find opportunities for students in businesses, and it still might be a week-long experience, but it might be in the IT pathway. We go and we tour 5 different facilities, one each day, for the students, so that they get an opportunity. What does Amazon look like? What does Google look like? What does Microsoft look like? So that they can see all of those different sites. In healthcare, can we take them to a nursing home facility? Can we take them to a large hospital? Can we take them to a rehab center so that they can see the different levels of patient care? So that's kind of what we're brainstorming right now. But a person actually starts on the 8th of July, so I can get back to you in a couple weeks with a little bit more information, but that's what they're going to be digging into right away.
And I would love for us to, and we have our friends from ACE coming up after this to talk about the potential synergies we would see in that kind of program. So it's not just taking students, but community members who would want that kind of intensive 1 week. The current, and we can talk more about this later, but I think the current structure of ACE, where you have to commit to one night every week for so many weeks, is very difficult for working professionals and families. So I love that idea, and I agree with my colleagues who say let's ramp it up as soon as possible. Sorry to put more pressure on you, but that's great.
That's our goal.
And Charles had spoken a little bit about improving the social media marketing of the programs. I would just point to, I think, one program that has the best practice on this, which is Fairfax Academy. And as an at-large person, I get out to all the academies, and I think they do by far the best job of reaching out to include community leaders in their events, and also promoting that through social media. And I think they have someone on staff who's focused on that kind of work. But I think if we have someone in each of our academies that's doing that same promotional effort, that will certainly help, in addition to whatever we decide to do centrally. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McElveen. I have Ms. Keys-Gamarra.
So I want to thank my colleagues for bringing up so many things that I wish I had said. But no, I think as I've listened to everybody, I feel like, and Ms. Hines mentioned the charge. And so one thing as I've listened, and I think you said something about understanding what the industry wants. And so Dr. Brabrand, I'm wondering how, I don't know how this can be done, but I'm wondering how we can survey industry to identify what they're looking for from our kids, because I know I've heard some anecdotal information of what they're not seeing and what they'd like to see. I know some of the certifications are available depending on where you live and whether you have access. And so if we were able to gather that information in a more cohesive way, I think it would be very helpful to students. And then that would be something that would be included in that communication plan to parents, not so much, oh, here's another FCPS survey, but here's how we're planning to equip your child as they leave and prepare them for the world. So as I've listened to everyone, I realize this may be a combination of what everybody has said, so I issue that disclaimer before I say this, because I do think that we've talked a lot around what should be included in that charge. So what I have is identifying whether we have equitable access to our programs, identify industry needs, and then once we identify those things, how best to communicate those so that parents would understand that we're now partnering with them and we're preparing their kids, and how we continue to support our kids, not just short-term, which such as the summer program, but whether we can use something like ACE, and I think someone mentioned this, to be able to continue that as a step out of FCPS. So I gathered that from all of us, and so I put it in a list.
Thank you, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Can I add to your list? So first, I think we have a communications issue. Our communications issue is, or a branding issue. When you advertise to kids that it's career and technical education, they focus on the technical education and people flee from it. And so I like your idea about emphasizing pathways, but maybe we need to rebrand it as a pathways to careers or pathways to employment. And then as far as the equity of access, I just want to make sure that when we talk about equity of access, we not only include geographic access, but also equity of access for our exceptional students with disabilities, because so often those are students that don't get recruited into our traditional CTE programs, and they actually could benefit greatly from these opportunities. Additionally, if I go to your survey, one of the things that came up was a student in IB who wanted to take CTE courses but could not. And so I think when we look at our IB courses and our IB certifications, that's actually where the CTE crossover is, and maybe we need to do a bit more unpacking of how we can use those IB certifications for our students who are looking for these opportunities. And then I also noted that one of the comments was that we should be doing more of promoting this during the school year and right after the winter break when kids are looking at course selections. The parents found it very helpful to have a conversation about these opportunities. And I personally have gone out to parent groups right after the holidays and talked about CTE, and it has been greatly, positively received. So we might want to look at how we build into our annual calendars that there is a conversation or an information session for parents and students on our pathways to employment programs. And so I just think we should encourage that as well. And I love your idea of your summer programming. One of the things I would add to the summer programming is a component which is, and if you like this, this is how you pursue this type of employment opportunity, either through post-high school education or certification, so that when the student leaves, if they're in 5th grade taking these, they leave and say, oh, this is my pathway. If they're in 12th grade, they leave with, or 11th grade, they leave with, this is my pathway. And so we almost have an individualized pathway for each kid. I do have a couple of go-backs. Okay. And my first go-back is with Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes, so I had left off on number 7, and that one is a very important one to this year's charge, because specifically what it said is that CTAC committee members utilized a common methodology for developing a communication strategy to produce innovative ideas for enhancing communication of these courses to parents and students. So I would like to understand, it said it was an industry focus group that did take place.
From the committee, yes.
Yeah,
members of the committee,
so
correct.
I would say we very much need to understand then what was produced out of that focus group, because this doesn't, I mean, to me, that would have absolutely been part of what I would hope to see in the recommendations, which is these were their innovative ideas for enhancing communication, but it's not captured here, so our staff can't even necessarily
Correct.
work with that.
It did drive recommendation number 1, though, because they realized, and we can go back to the notes and provide the sort of the sub-bullets, because they whiteboarded it. We didn't capture everything, but we can sort of highlight it. But that led to recommendation number 1, because they realized in what CTE is trying to do and push out and communicate, how are they also leveraging existing communication channels, things that an actual communication staff is doing, seeing that that person doesn't reside in the CTE department. How could you leverage best practices from the Office of Communications and Community Relations to leverage social media, the Twitter accounts, and other aspects of communication across FCPS? They saw that as being lacking. So from their ideas, it's like, it's great that you can do all of this, but Beth and CTE can't do that. And then that's where this recommendation came from. So.
Thank you. And then I also then had a question related to that recommendation number 1, where there's been a reference now about the Perkins grant and the CTEMS application. So in other words, is this grant going to be a self-supporting grant to pay for both of these new positions that you're all describing?
Yes.
And yet it was kind of indicated that it's a recommendation to the board, but if the action's already been taken, I don't really understand what role the board, if any, plays in that recommendation.
When the committee came up with the recommendation, and correct me if I'm wrong, when the committee came up with the recommendation, the CTEMS report had not yet been approved, and so the committee wanted to show the board that they were supportive of that recommendation being approved. Is that?
That is correct.
Okay.
And the fact that sort of ensuring that those funds, once they are allocated to FCPS, are spent on that specific role. Because you can recommend that in the CTEMS, but that's not how it has to be spent. So we were encouraging the board to say, as you're allocating or supporting what CTE department is trying to do, we want to ensure that this role does get created and exist for the next 3 years.
Well, I would say then that I appreciate the recommendation from CTEC, and I would say to my colleagues as a next step to Dr. Brabrand, if Fairfax County is given that grant funding for those positions, I still feel that that's a responsibility of the board to determine, how we're going to give that money. If it can be spent in other ways, it's something I think we should at least have a better understanding before we just sort of say, well, this was a recommendation that came out of committee. I don't know how much they, in their short time they were together, discussed it and what's driving it. So that would be.
We've discussed it quite some time. We actually initially put a proposal for the school district to create that position in a previous recommendation a couple years ago. So this is the fruition of that coming into play, where Beth and her team have found a way to add it to the CTEMS because it was not funding to cover the cost of the position out of the FCPS budget.
We
And
received an
Charles-
increase in funding this year, so everything that has previously been funded through Perkins, it is not taking away from anything that was previously done, or any of the equipment, or staff development, or student support. This is an additional funding because it's a new authorization of Perkins, and so there is a new formula. And because we have an increase in enrollment, we received an additional allotment of money.
So I would just say to my colleagues, as we figure out the charge for next year, I appreciate the additional ideas about looking at equity of access across the county and where you go to school and where you can get those courses. But I would still like to see that the committee is going to be focused on getting a more formalized recommendation to the board on how we're going to improve communications, because I've been on this board 8 years, and it's been an 8-year challenge to try and figure out how to get students and parents to understand the existence of these very valuable courses, and then for them to help students in their for future careers. You were supposed to. So the only final remarks that I wanted to share with my colleagues is that most of you are probably not aware, but my appointee, Jim McCormick, has served with distinction on the CTAC for 10 years now. He served for my predecessor, Tessie Wilson, and now 8 years during my tenure. And so I did want to take the unique privilege here to just personally recognize Jim for his incredible passion, dedication as a thermonuclear engineer with almost a 30-year career with the military and then in the defense industry, continues to be a stalwart volunteer in our schools as well to help with the science extracurricular activities over at Woodson High School. Jim has just been profound and amazing in his passion, his work, and I'm so grateful for his service for the Braddock District and for Fairfax County Schools. So Jim, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. I also have Ms. Strauss for Go Back and Ms. Hines.
Great, thank you. I went ahead and actually looked up your course catalog. And in business and information technology, again, as we're looking at how looking at pathways and looking at partnerships with ACE and sort of how all of this falls out. In this particular category is where you have all of your technology, your cyber whatevers. And I mean, years ago, in 93, 94, when we first before you were born, when we...
Oh, no, I was born. I was working here then.
When we reimagined the pathways and the concept of all of that, when we create the vision and the possibilities for course selections and activities for pathway in cyber, in IT, in STEM, which is obviously a huge expanding industry. I think must have 70% of the parents in my schools are in the STEM industry. How does that fit with business information technology, with what I'm seeing here, and partnerships and all the rest of that, plus our ask at the state level to be able to have some of our technology and computer science courses qualify for a math credit? Where are we with all of this? And this really rich offering in business and information technology, how does that fit?
It all ties together. We have a robust computer science offering and a robust basic computer offering down to coding in the middle school up through network administration. So those two groups are working very closely together and looking at implementing the new standards K through 12. And so we're looking at really melding the two of those together and making sure that we have a pathway that kids understand where it's infused in core curriculum at the elementary level and then more individualized curriculum at the high school level. We're working with, we just actually had a meeting last week or the week before with Amazon Web Services to talk about some curriculum they're putting out. We're working with Northern Virginia Community College in a grant for the Tech Talent Pipeline. We're also working with JP Morgan Chase in the Greater Washington Partnership and looking at can we do early access to college courses for students. So we have a lot of irons in the fire, to say right now, trying to make sure that we're melding all of those together. Next week, or week after next, excuse me, several of our computer science project team members are traveling to Norfolk for a partnership with George Mason and Norfolk City Schools to see what they're doing. We're working with Loudoun Schools to see what we're doing. We have a meeting scheduled for the week after the 4th of July with all of our regional career and technical education administrators to see how we can make sure that we're offering the same types of courses in all of our districts so that as students go from one district to the other, that they'll have those same course offerings offerings and also be able to have those same pathways through to Nova. So we're having all of those conversations right now. We've got a lot of people working on this, from our STEAM team to our Business Information Technology Program Manager to our computer science specialist to our school counseling staff. So pulling all of those together to try to have a concerted effort to make sure that we are trying to fill that gap that exists between job opportunity and the workforce. And we do have a huge gap right now. We have a lot of job openings, and so we are working very
Exactly.
closely with business partners. A variety of us sit on a variety of different panels, but working with the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, working with Northern Virginia Technology Council, and then several different groups that have been formed specifically as task force to look at this area of need. And those are all regional activities.
So in braiding our courses and our course offerings and creating really a braided pathway, this is absolutely. So it is CTE, Business and Information Technology, and which other departments specifically?
Computer science and math.
Computer science and math. And did the state allow us to give math credit, required credit for graduation with computer science? I lost track of that.
I'm going to defer to Jen on graduation requirements. I always defer to my school counseling friends on that. It is not my area of expertise.
Can you tell me again the question?
Okay, the question was, is computer science to satisfy a graduation, a math requirement? 'Cause
There are sequences that allow computer science to count for math, yes.
Okay.
Certain computer science courses can count for math in certain requirements. There has not been as much flexibility as we would have liked for computer science to count for other things or coding to count for world languages.
Right.
But as
the
far as
math.
computer science and math, we're making progress. And truly, I mean, Beth just summarized a lot of different work that is happening.
Yeah.
I think 2 years from now, when we're sitting here, you're going to be so excited about what we're doing with computer science and STEAM in our division, specifically with those different pathways at the high school level. We're really doing some great and innovative work, and I'm excited to share as it gets developed.
Because I think that's been part of our struggle, is that over the years, people see CTE over here and everything else over here, when all of this is really braided together so well in so much of what CTE offers and everything else, so.
And that's what our pathway efforts are.
Exactly.
What we're hoping to do is braid not just in computer science, but in all of our areas.
Exactly, because it all fits. Okay. Thank you.
Beth, is it true, and if it's not, tell this group it's not, the level of systematic collaboration and cooperation now around these issues of CTE and partnering with industry is at a higher level than it has ever been in FCPS?
I'd say it's tripled in the last 5 years.
Good.
The recognition for the need for integration of multiple opportunities for students, the support from the school board, all the way up through leadership team, from the community, from the business community, we get calls on a weekly basis from people in trades, from people in IT, from every aspect of industry wanting to partner. And so that's one of the reasons that we're looking at trying to support these positions, so that we can have additional support to meld a pathway for us to make sure that we are doing the right thing. We just need some extra hands on deck to make it work.
Ms. Hines.
Thank you. So just to circle back around with the charge, I appreciate, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, your ideas, because I think this is our opportunity to sort of massage it a little bit and send some direction before you go off for next year. So thank you. We did all get the email. Thank you very much, Anne. And it says the current proposed charges in collaboration with industry develop strategies and support for continuing improvement in coordination and communication of CTE programs. And I think that's great as far as it goes, right? But I'll be honest, I think if all we ever talk about every year is communication, we're missing a lot of conversation. And so I like the idea of also reporting back to the board an identification in some way of how well we're doing with equitable access, maybe in a heat map almost kind of an approach to it, so we know where it's available and where it's missing, and if that makes sense. And then also to identify, I think you said industry needs, right? And report back to the board what that gap looks like, because you talked about it a lot, that gap between the jobs and kids who are ready for the jobs. And I think this board would very much like to see some detail about that. Does that make sense as additional
Absolutely.
to the charge?
These are the conversations that we're having with our academy administrators, with our principals, at our within our office, with our partners in school counseling and curriculum instruction. These are the same conversations that we're having now, is how to gather that information and how to report it out in a way that is meaningful and discernible for people, and how we can make sustainable changes.
Okay. Does that make sense to the rest of the board, though? Because I think if we're going to give direction, we have to be on board, right?
And we'll be voting on all of the committee charges in July, and so we do have the opportunity to come back and do that. Okay. Before we let you go, I just wanted to suggest that when you come back, and maybe we need to schedule time in the fall for you all to come back and separate from the CTE Advisory Committee. Ms. Downey, I know you guys are doing such great work with the J.P. Morgan Chase and the Go Virginia, and the collaboration with some of these other groups. I've been at a lot of those meetings and trying to, with different discussions from different hats that I wear, and I think it would be helpful for the board to have a work session on how this all impacts what the high school of the future looks like for us, because the state of Virginia is looking at reinventing the high school experience, and what we're doing here, and centered around much of the work that you're leading, really is a key component to reinventing that high school experience.
Absolutely.
Okay. So once again, thank you all so very much for your excellent work and dedication to our student